turnout. My name is Kulsum Jaffrey. I am part of the Momentum organizing group here in Bristol, and I'm also a co-organizer for Bristol Transformed, which is a festival that we hold once a year here in Bristol, inspired by the World Transformed. So just a couple logistical things to go through first. The toilets are through the corridor in the back of the room, and then there are fire exits at the back as well, and then also one to my left here, so please keep that in mind in case of an emergency. I will introduce our first speaker, who will be Shown Up, who is an activist with the Green New Deal.
Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Cool. All right, wow, there's a lot of people here, which is great. Cool. Hi, I'm Shona Jemfrey. I'm from Bristol West Constituency Labour Party. I'm a council candidate for Lawrence Hill, and I'm a member of the Labour for a Green New Deal campaign group. So I've been asked to speak briefly about the Green New Deal because that's something that Rebecca Lovelay's worked really hard on, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about later. So the reason why we need it, I think most of us in this room probably know why we need it, but just to recap. For example, so me, I'm 29, and myself and my peers, we should be at the stage where we're thinking, do we want to start a family? And actually many of us aren't sure whether we can make that choice, whether that even is a choice, because we don't know what future our children or our grandchildren would try and have to survive in. And if we don't act, then we will trigger tipping points. Huge swathes of the world will become uninhabitable, the suffering and death toll will be catastrophic. And for many, particularly in the global south, that's already happening. People are dying, millions more will from famine, war, dangerous migration as they try to escape. And it will be the poorest and most marginalised and most vulnerable who suffer the most. And they'll feel the effects the most, whether that's air pollution poisoning our children's lungs, or communities being submerged under rising sea levels, or surface flooding, or heat stroke affecting our elderly. So a Green New Deal, also known as the Green Industrial Revolution, they're the same thing. Sometimes that's confusing, but they are the same thing. That's the way to avoid crashing through the climate tipping points. So we're talking about investment and good jobs in low carbon industries and building thousands of new wind turbines and solar panels, and we're talking about safe, good quality public transport that connects cities and towns so people don't have to rely on cars. And we're talking about rewilding and protecting our landscapes. So the Labour for a Green New Deal campaign group, that started in March last year. And less than a year ago, and that was inspired by the work done in America by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Sunrise Movement, and local groups quickly sprung up throughout the country. Labour members, and I know many here, passed their motion through the branches and passed that motion through the constituencies, and by the time it got to conference in September 2019, 128 constituency Labour parties had sent in motions about it, which is pretty amazing. And for anyone who's not been to Labour Party conference, what happens then is that each group who has submitted a similar motion, they need to have to try and agree a version, a wording that can all get behind. So you take all the motions, you kind of smoosh them together into one. And because so many CLPs and trade unions, including the Fire Brigade Union, who I think are also here today, and they're amazing, they had all sent in Green New Deal motions. That meant there were about 200 people in that meeting room. And the meeting in total lasted 10.5 hours, which was pretty record-breaking. We smashed the record for the Brexit meeting the year before, which was 5 hours. And we had to split it over 2 nights because the venue kicked us out on midnight on the first night because they wanted to go home. But Becky, and she was Shadow Secretary for State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and she was there the whole time, even though it was her birthday. So we sang her happy birthday at the end. But she was really calm, and she was really stateswoman-like, and she encouraged everyone to work together. And people were getting quite stressed because 10.5 hours we wanted to be out partying and meeting people, but we knew this was really important and we knew we had to get it right. So Becky has said she will continue to fight for a Green New Deal, which is a revolutionary new era of green energy and decarbonisation by 2030, because a Green New Deal would hugely improve our quality of life and give our children some hope. Workers are needed to build these, so it's about workers in the fossil fuel industry getting any upskilling they need to work in the green energy industry, and it has to be a just transition with new jobs to replace the old ones, because we're a party for the people as well as the planet, and people they want to know when their next paycheck's coming from. They can't think like that, they can't think about 5 years down the road. So I did used to be a member of the Green Party, I'm really sorry, but I moved to Labour once I realised that Labour are the only party who have a chance of making these ideas a reality. And we have the class analysis and class understanding to understand that workers and the working class need to be at the centre of it, because we have the links with the trade unions, and workers have to be at the heart of it, leading it, because we need their knowledge and expertise. I don't know how a wind farm works, so we need people who do. We need to take steps to address the environmental issues. We have to make sure it works for everyone, not just the privileged, otherwise our message doesn't get through. Locally in Bristol, we're not waiting 5 years, because politics doesn't just happen in elections. So we're really lucky to have loads of passionate, dedicated activists and community representatives. You know, the council are doing a lot of work on decarbonising heat and electric, and working toward doubling the frequency of buses and pedestrianising the city centre. And local campaign groups as well. So I know the National Food Service are doing some really good work around focusing on communal dining, because actually the way we eat at the minute isn't very environmentally friendly, and it's not good for us or our bodies. I think at Richard Bergen's event later today, they're having a free meal that you're all invited to, because you know, the Green New Deal, that will cover every aspect of our lives and make them greener and more sustainable. So we need one, and Rebecca Long-Bailey is the one to lead us forward. I have been really impressed by her calls for abolishing the House of Lords, more internal party democracy. She has the experience and background we need to take us into the next battle. She'll make people feel listened to, and clearly at the minute they don't feel listened to by the Labour Party. We can spend all night here, you know, analysing the last election, but we don't have time. But we clearly need people to feel like we are listening to them. She's seen people suffering on the ground, and I know she understands the need for a Green New Deal. This isn't a woman who's interested in the position for the fame and attention. She's not a reality TV celebrity. She's a serious, dedicated, hard-working politician. She's been in Parliament for years, and she really knows her stuff. And anyone who gives up 10.5 hours on their birthday to patiently and calmly work through the really tedious at times bureaucracy that is needed in Parliament, that's someone who has my attention. So I really recommend you give her your attention as well. Thank you very much.
So much, Shona. I mean, I'll just echo everything you said. That's exactly right. Everyone who was at the hustings knows that Rebecca Long-Bailey was there, and she was demanding for the Green Industrial Revolution, and we know she's going to fight for it when she becomes leader. So our next speaker is Corey Drew, who is a parliamentary candidate in Bournemouth.
Hi, I apologise if I'm a little bit out of breath. I've just run from the other venue to get here. I'm Corey. I was the candidate in the election just gone in Bournemouth East, which we don't talk about Dorset very much, and we definitely don't talk about Bournemouth in the context of trying to fight for the Labour Party. But we had a huge swing off the back of the fantastic manifesto in 2017, and we put up a really big fight between that election and the election in December, and off of the back of our fantastic policies, we were able to hold on to most of that swing in the election that we've just had, and now have a huge vibrant group of people who are building campaigns locally. And a lot of the credit for that goes to the fantastic Green New Deal policies that Rebecca Long-Bailey gave to us. And we've really seen how in Bournemouth, I don't know if you know, we have the largest oil field that's being currently, and has been for a long time, being tapped quietly just off of our coast. And we saw in the last couple of years the Conservative government and local council turn down an offshore wind farm, which was very popular with the local public, and then this year instead agreed to have extra sites drilled for oil and gas off of our shore. So this year we actually saw an oil rig arrive on the horizon just 6 kilometres from our beautiful award-winning beach, and the public were completely dismayed by this. And we really saw a very united feeling behind wanting to have green policies and wanting our council and our representatives to be green. We have a really, really strong youth strike for climate in Bournemouth. It's absolute joy to see people coming together in a town which has been very unpolitical for a really long time, and to see people actually coming together over the issues that matter to them, and to be able to go out knocking on the doorsteps during the run-up to the general election and say, you know, these are the things we're all passionate about and we want to live on, and look at our fantastic green policy. That alone was such a winner on the doorstep. We had so many people who were undecided who came over to voting Labour for the first time in a Tory stronghold because they really, really valued the green policies, and we could see that in the data. People were moving across from voting Green to voting Labour, and we know that if we keep building on that, that we will be able to win our seat next time. And that is one of the very many reasons why I'm backing Rebecca to be our leader, because I think she's the perfect person to bring us forward with a positive message that is that the most important issue of our time is making sure that we protect our planet, that we stop climate change, and that we do that in a way that's really good for the economy and for jobs. And she's packaged that so beautifully. She's given us something to be proud of. I joined Labour to back Jeremy Corbyn, and I believe very firmly that we need that socialist manifesto and that we need socialism at the core of everything that we do. I'm still wearing my Corbyn badge. I don't normally get past that, thank you. I've refused to take it off, but I would very much like to have a Rebecca Bailey badge to put next to it, and a Richard Bergen badge too. But you know, we fought really hard to bring our party to a point where we've got proud socialist policies right at the centre of everything we're doing. And I know that Rebecca Bailey will not only protect what we've built, but that she'll build on that, and that's what we need. And she's got such vision, and I think not only can we back her, but we can do so proudly and enthusiastically, and that's what we need, a campaign that we can get really behind for the next 5 years, and let's get rid of the Tories.
Thank you so much, Corey. And finally, before our main guest, we have one more speaker, Trevor from the Fire Brigade Union. Thank you.
How are you doing? Can you hear me all right? Yes, God, this is not my speech. I wish I would have prepared one, to be honest with you. Just two things before I get started. If a fire alarm does go off, obviously there's a big fire exit there as well, so don't bother about going down there. There is a big way there. And just to let you know, Avon Fire and Rescue Service, they're recruiting whole-time firefighters next month. So if you've got any people who do want to join the fire service, it's only the second time in the last 10 years they've recruited. Go online and look to join. And also in 2 weeks' time, Bristol are doing a solidarity march for Justice for Grenfell. So if you haven't been on one of the marches before, so yeah, obviously I'm not here to talk about Grenfell because I'll be here all night, but I'm here to back Becky really for the Labour Leadership Council. I'm Trevor, I'm a firefighter, I've been a firefighter for 25 years now, brilliant job, best job in the world. I'm also a trade union official for the Fire Brigade Union. That's not the best job in the world, that's for sure. But I love doing that as well. We represent members from Swindon all the way down to Penzance, so it's quite a considerable area, but it's an honour to represent my union and my members. We met last Wednesday to look at everyone, all the candidates, and we almost unanimously backed Becky for the leadership campaign. But you have to realise the history my union has with the FBU as to why we come to that decision. It's quite important really. We've been on strike 3 times, 1977, 2003, 4 and 2010. 2010 it was pensions, many of you probably work in the public sector here, the changes there. We won that, to be honest with you. We went to an ET, we had to take our government to the Employment Tribunal on discrimination. How does that work out? And we won, and we're trying to now sort the remedy out, and our pension will be reinstated. 1977, I was about that high. Don't really remember too much about it, but the firefighters there went out on strike for nine weeks. It was overpay. They got a little bit of an increase in their pay, not too much to be honest with you. And they got a decrease in the working week. They used to work over 50 hours a week. It come down to 48 hours a week. But the good thing there was we got a quarter of an increase in the workforce. So it was a victory, and we also got a pay formula, which basically meant our pay rises went up every year based on a certain wage. That lasted us well until the mid-90s to the year 2000. We went on strike 2003, 2004 over pay. And it was a really horrible dispute. First time I walked out the doors, it was horrendous. The New Labour battered us, to be frank with you. Really treated firefighters despicably. And it got to the point where in 2005 we disaffiliated from Labour. We've had enough. It really put a generation of firefighters away from Labour. And that continued for many years. We had to keep a political influence, so we formed the FBU parliamentary group, and Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell were founding members of that, and over that 10-year period we worked really closely with them and really done some great work for us, so we are loyal to them. So in 2015, when all that happened, you know what happened, we re-affiliated to the Labour Party. And we supported Jeremy and John through that time, because to be frank with you, there was quite a lot of people in the party who didn't. One sat here who did, to be frank with you. So when the election happened and obviously the result, people were standing down and in the leadership campaign, we wrote to every single candidate with some questions that were also specific to us but also to the political agenda. And like I say, we met as an executive council last Wednesday and endorsed Becky as our candidate. And it's just a bit of a no-brainer really for us. And just take one question that we asked the candidates. It was around whether they would repeal the Trade Union Act 2016. Now look, I'm a trade union official, and that act makes my job and working people's lives really hard, really difficult, you know. The challenges we had prior to that were bad enough, but Becky come back, yeah, of course you would, you know what I mean? Other candidates wouldn't, so how could you support them, you know what I mean? Let's get real, you know. So look, that's all I'm going to say, because Becky's here, she's going to speak a lot better than what I am, but like I say, please get on the march next week, 2 weeks' time, and get Becky as the leader. Thank you.
I am so excited and so proud to introduce the next leader of our Labour Party, Rebecca Long Bailey.
Thanks so much, everybody. Can you hear me at the back? All right, good. I'm so pleased to see so many people here on a Saturday afternoon, when I know that a lot of you have been to the hustings as well, so you're probably all politicked out by this point on a Saturday and you just want to get home and get your slippers on and relax. But hopefully you'll be energised by the end of this, I hope. And I know we've had fantastic speakers already tonight, Kulsoom, Corey, Shona and Trevor, and I think that represents the breadth of talent that we've got within the Labour Party. Because together we are the Labour Party, and we're the greatest force for social change that this country has ever seen. And together we'll unite, we'll rebuild, and we'll win. Now, I've spent a lot of time in the Southwest over the last year or so, from Cornwall to Stroud, pulling together many of the ideas that went into our manifesto. And I say our manifesto because it came from our members, it came from our trade unions, and it came from every corner of the Labour movement. And yes, we failed to make our case to the country, and much of what we said was overshadowed by Brexit, unfortunately. But I'm proud of the measures that we took, the radical action that we set out to tackle the climate crisis and rebuild communities, democratic public ownership of our utilities and investment in public services, and an economy that puts workers' rights and our quality of life ahead of profit. And make no mistake, that's all to fight for now. And that's why it's so great to be here in Bristol talking to you about why I want to be the next leader of the Labour Party. And in terms of where I'm coming from, a lot of you in this room already know, but some of you might not. But like most people, I got most of my politics from my experiences growing up. I developed my politics sitting at the top of our stairs at home when my dad came home from his 2:10 shift, and I'd be sat there nosing. I was meant to be asleep in bed, but I'd be nosing at what my mum and dad were saying to each other. And my dad was a trade union rep, and I'd hear him talking to my mum in the living room about pay disputes, about redundancies, and about the terrible things that he'd had to face at work. And then when I was 16, I got my first job, and I got a job in a pawn shop, a PAWN shop, not a pawn shop. And that was an eye-opener, because we'd had 18 years or so of Tory rule by that point, and you could see what it meant when a government was washing its hands of its people. People having to come in to pawn family heirlooms. There was one ring that used to stick in my mind that said Nan on it, and this lady that used to come in all the time to get a tenner on this Nan ring so that she could give the money to her daughter, who was a single parent, who was out of work and was struggling. And one week this lady came in when she'd gone past the deadline of the agreement, and we couldn't give her a ring back. And that was a present off her grandkids. And I remember thinking then, in the richest economy, or at least one of the richest economies in the world, why can we not provide for our own people? Why are we not ensuring that their lives and their quality of life improves every single year? And in 1997, after that, we obviously saw the instalment of a Labour government, and I saw people bouncing down the street with hope and a spring in their step, hopeful that the future was going to be bright for them. Well, that hope seems to be in short supply nowadays, unfortunately. And we suffered what can only be described as our worst election defeat in a generation. We retained our Bristol, Exeter and Plymouth seats, but we lost Stroud, and we went backwards across much of the southwest, which should be a completely Labour area in my view. In the Midlands, in the North and in Scotland, we lost thousands of voters to the Tories and the SNP. And it was clear that the coalition of voters that we'd managed to hold together in 2017 was starting to fragment and fall apart. And I remember being in my kitchen on the way out to the election count. So my mum and dad had come round to look after my little boy, so me and the husband could go to the count. And we were waiting, eagerly for the exit poll to come on the television. And I thought to myself, well, we're either going to win, or worst case scenario, it's going to be a hung parliament. It's not going to be, really, really bad. And then when we saw the results coming up on the television, it was as if the earth moved underneath me. I felt absolutely shattered. I didn't speak for a good while. My mum burst into tears and started shouting across the kitchen, the hope's gone, everyone's hope's gone, what are we going to do now? And I gathered my thoughts together and became resolute, because my big fear was that everything that we'd worked for the last 4 or 5 years, everything that we believed in, that transformation within our economy that we knew was possible to lift everyone in our communities up, the arguments would now begin as to that not being possible and people not wanting that. So I resolved that night not to let that happen, and I resolved that night never to let us face a defeat like that again. Now we need to be honest, and of course we all will be, about what went wrong. And it was clear that this was in part a Brexit election. And whilst it made sense to try and bring together our divided communities, if you like those Leave voters and those Remain voters, it just didn't work. Many of our Leave voters, particularly in the constituency where I'm from, they just thought we were trying to overturn the referendum result. And many of our really strong Remain supporters, they didn't think that we were putting forward a robust case for a close relationship with the EU. So we confused many of our constituents, and I think the results were there for everybody to see. And that failure took a lot of us down with it, unfortunately. We failed on messaging. The Tories had a get Brexit done. That was the only thing pretty much in their entire manifesto. But that resonated with people. They understood what the Tories were about. But in terms of what we were about, we had one of the greatest manifestos that the world had ever seen. But there was no message to link it all together and explain in a very, very quick way to our voters what Labour was going to do for them. And we talked about everything apart from the very reason that the general election was called in many cases. Now, we didn't talk enough about the plans for a green industrial revolution, and that had the opportunity As I've said to a few people in this room before, it was the biggest economic lever we've ever had to be able to transform our economy and tackle the climate crisis all in one. It was our NHS moment, if you like. We could have transformed huge parts of the country, re-industrialised areas, and given us a national and global purpose to do good across the world. And we would have led the world on climate change and that green industrial revolution. And it would have brought together voters in rural areas, in urban areas. It would have brought together young people and old people. And it would have started to paint the picture for many of our communities as to what the future might look like. Because we've never won an election where we've just criticised the Tories and said, oh, life will get a little bit better, we'll tinker around the edges a bit and make it less bad than the Tories. We've only ever won elections when we've had a clear, exciting vision for what the future will look like. Whether that was 1945 and the post-war reconstruction, whether that was 1997 after decades of Conservative rule, we provided that hope. And the Green Industrial Revolution was one part of putting together that vision of hope. And finally, I think we've all got to recognise, and I'm pretty sure that we all do, that we lost trust with many of our voters over a number of issues. Anti-Semitism and the way that we tackle discrimination within our party was one, and the other one was division. We've not been a united party for the last 4 years. And divided parties don't win general elections, unfortunately. And yes, it's right for us to have discussions about policy, but we do that behind closed doors. And once we've agreed what our position is, we unify and we remember who the real enemy is, the Conservative Party. And everything that we do should be to make sure that they never win power ever again. And we are a broad church. And that's what makes us so exciting and so good, in my view. And it's good to have different groups within the Labour Party. It's not right to call some groups a cult. It's not right to call others Tories and tell them to go away, because that debate is healthy. And when we created our party all them years ago, we knew that we were bringing together a coalition of the centre-left. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we also knew that if we didn't all come together, we'd never have a force that was capable of getting rid of the Conservatives, and we'd never have a force that was capable of keeping them out of power for good. And we need to remember that fact. And after this leadership election's finished, I'll support whoever the leader is if it's not me, and I expect all of the other candidates to do exactly the same thing as our members do when they're out knocking on doors in the rain and the snow, trying to get the party elected. Now, we can't ever forget what inspired us to come into politics either, and why we're the Labour Party. And for me, it's simple. It's a fundamental principle that with every passing generation will ensure that our children's lives will be better than our own and that no one is ever left behind. And it's a message of aspiration and collective hope, if you like. Aspiration, pride of place, these aren't just empty phrases. It means a Labour Party that's willing to invest in our communities so that we've got public services, jobs and high streets that we can all be proud of. It means a Labour Party that won't shy away from the difficult questions of ownership within our economy. A Labour Party that pursues modern democratic forms of ownership for our rail, mail, energy, water and more. And it means a Labour Party that will tackle the climate emergency, eliminating the substantial majority of our emissions by 2030. And we can't roll back on that promise because it's too important. And as Shadow Secretary of State, I worked with experts and trade unions, Labour members and the wider climate movement to develop the most detailed and ambitious policies to tackle the climate crisis of any major political party in the world. There are many parties that talk about the climate crisis and they talk about the need for a Green New Deal. But we were the party that was trying to fill in the detail and show people what that Green New Deal really could look like. We have a plan to decarbonise the energy system, 30 steps by 2030. If you're bored tonight when you get in, Google it, 'cause it's on the Labour Party website and it's one of the most exciting things you'll have ever read in your entire life. And it's written and endorsed by leading energy experts and climate scientists. It's not just politicians and members with ideas, although that's all been fed into it. We had academics and engineers and industry experts, showing us the technologies that were possible so that we knew exactly what could be delivered by 2030. So that when we thought we were going to win that general election, we were ready to go on day one, creating the jobs, making sure our colleges were skilling up our people to be able to do those jobs, making sure that we were starting to put together the supply chains to provide materials and the products for that. So it was very, very detailed. We also had a plan for an electric car revolution, and unfortunately that really didn't get much airtime over the last few months. We had a plan for the decarbonisation of heavy industry, for massive investment in green infrastructure and industry to revive the fortunes of our towns, cities, regions and create over 1 million green jobs. We had a plan for our steel sector to feed in British steel into that infrastructure plan so that we were supporting all of the other industries that were around us. And again, you know, this was something that our communities didn't know that we were doing, so it was really sad. And crucially, we had a plan to do it in a way that was democratic and fair, ensuring that there was a just transition for workers that were affected in industries that might be impacted by this change. And these are the steps that any government serious about tackling the climate crisis would have to take. And that's why we need to think outside the box, put aside the tribalism and work with everyone to hit that 2030 target as quickly as possible. And we can all say we support a Green New Deal or a Green Industrial Revolution, but committing to that 2030 target and the plan that gets us there is what counts. And that means there can't be any watering down of the ambitious policies we set ourselves at conference to achieve this target. And of these, I'd like to highlight 5 key elements tonight, really. First, we need to upgrade our country's 27 million homes to the highest level of energy efficiency over the next decade. Now, that's a monumental task, 27 million homes. It's the most ambitious upgrade to our housing since the post-war reconstruction. But it will cut our bills, it will make our homes warmer and better and healthier, and it will create hundreds of thousands of new jobs. And it's non-negotiable if we're serious about climate change. Secondly, we've got to have a programme of public-led investments to dramatically ramp up the level of wind power with over 9,000 new wind turbines right across the country. Thirdly, we've got to invest in enough solar panels to cover 22,000 football pitches. That's quite a lot of solar panels. And fourth, we need to build out the UK's electric vehicle charging network so that it can support over 20 million electric vehicles by 2030. Because the electric vehicle revolution won't happen by itself. It won't happen if people don't find it easy, and it won't happen if people don't find it affordable. It's as simple as that. And if we're not manufacturing the cars of the future, other countries overseas will. And then our car industry will fall on its knees, and it's facing a difficult enough time as it is. So we have a duty to push the government to support that industry by providing the market that it desperately needs to shift into this new form of vehicle production. And we've also got to ensure that we are leading the world on the manufacturing of those vehicles. And then fifth and finally, we need to reorganise our economy and our institutions in a way that can rise up to this tremendous challenge, probably the greatest challenge that any society has ever faced. And I always called the Green Industrial Revolution the silent revolution, because it was a way to democratise our economy without trauma, without disruption. It was the creation of new industries, new types of business ownership that would be new, community-led, public-led, cooperatives, if you like, so that we'd start to diversify what we see as business naturally. And we could have done that through the Green Industrial Revolution. We also need planning and coordination. We need economies of scale, and we need it to be just, to be fair, and to bring everybody with us. It's not the invisible hand we need, it's all hands on deck. And that's why I'm calling for democratic, regional and municipal energy agencies to own and run our energy networks. And I'll never go back on that. To invest on a grand scale to decarbonise our energy system, to end the overcharging of customers and to oversee a just transition for our energy workers. And this isn't ideological. You know, the Conservatives all the way through the general election will say, oh, you know, you just like this because you like bringing things into public ownership. I mean, I do. But it wasn't an ideological reason as to why we wanted to bring energy networks into public ownership. It's because we needed to have the infrastructure to be able to deliver these plans as quickly as we needed to. We also knew that reports that had been produced for Parliament stated that the investments that were required weren't happening within the infrastructure at present, and dividend extraction was being prioritised over these investments. And that can't happen anymore if we're really going to prioritise tackling climate change. It makes common sense, and public ownership of our vital utilities does make economic common sense, and it makes common sense to many of our constituents, given that these were some of the most popular policies within the manifesto. And I'd renew tonight my call on all candidates to back those proposals that were in the manifesto. Now, of course, I know we lost in December, and I know that if we'd won, I'd be working towards that 2030 target by now. But the climate crisis is too important for the future of our planet to put on hold for 5 years. We are running out of time, and as David Attenborough said, or Sir David Attenborough, we do still have time. But if we start treading water and waiting for the next Labour government, we're not going to have enough time. And the impact on our communities of that sudden shift will be huge. And we want this to be something that improves lives rather than detriments and becomes a burden on people's local economies. So our progress in tackling the climate crisis can't be left to the whims of Boris Johnson, and that's why Labour has a duty to campaign, alongside others, for reducing emissions by 2030 whilst in opposition. And that means upping our game in Parliament. It means going community to community to rebuild support for the green industrial revolution. It means actively supporting climate strikers, Extinction Rebellion, anti-fracking campaigners and other movements across the world. It means fighting against government moves to put climate activists on the list of prescribed organisations. So we led Parliament in declaring a climate emergency before the general election, and we've got to hold the government to account on taking action on this, but it's not going to happen across the dispatch box, much as it might look nice on television for everybody to watch. We've talked the talk about being a movement-led party in recent years, but to win on climate change, we're actually going to have to do it. And of course, a livable climate is just one part of the economic agenda that we need to deliver. From a positive agenda for trade union rights to promoting new cooperative and worker-owned businesses, we need to put workers' interests and long-term sustainability at the heart of decision-making. And alongside our economic plans, I've also set out proposals for a democratic revolution in the party and in the country. Now, you've probably heard about Boris Johnson wanting to move the House of Lords to York, as if that's like going to make a massive difference. But what the Tories don't get is that it's not just about where power's located, it's about who holds the power and what they do with it. And if I become leader, our message to voters on democracy is going to be a simple one. We're going to put power in your hands where it's always belonged. Because as the great Nye Bevan has always said, the whole point of getting power is to be able to give power away. And that's what the Labour Party does. So you've already heard, we're sweeping away the House of Lords, the only unelected chamber in Europe, with an elected Senate outside of London, which will have a mandate to hold the government to account on the impact of legislation, and that impact will be distribution of wealth, well-being, and on environmental sustainability. Because we've got a saying in Salford, we say the welfare of the people is the highest law. Now, we don't have an official constitution here in the UK, and that's something that I would like to see, if I'm honest. And I believe that the role of government is the safety and betterment of its people. And every single decision that government makes should be to improve lives and improve quality of life. As every year goes by, as every generation passes, not go backwards, as we've seen over the last 10 years. So we'll go further, We'll devolve real power from Westminster to a regional and local level to rebuild our infrastructure and invest in local economies and public services. We'll work with Scottish and Welsh Labour to craft a new constitutional settlement for Britain, and we'll take big money out of politics for good, ending the Gentlemen's Club of Westminster. And we've also got to go further on democracy within our own party, because as I said at the hustings today, no one's going to trust us to democratise the economy or politics if we can't democratise our own party adequately. And that runs from how we develop our policies to how we select our candidates. And if we're going to build a mass movement capable of taking on the Tories and counteracting a hostile media, now is the time to break out of the so-called bunker and to become the open democratic party that we've always aspired to be. So I would be committed to open and democratic policy making at every level. I want to overhaul and properly resource political education so that our members are empowered at their meetings to discuss and develop policy, because much as I loved spending 10 hours in the Green New Deal motion at conference, I do think that we should be spending a lot of our time in our branch and constituency meetings getting to the nitty-gritty of policy making. We can still have the policy, motion bit at conference, but we need to have a wider policy making discussion. And one of the things that came out of the Green Industrial Revolution kind of tour that I did, and I know John McDonald did a similar New Economics tour, was the wealth of ideas that we picked up from our members in areas about what they wanted to see, and that fed into what became the Green Industrial Revolution and the policies that our academics and energy experts worked on. And that's how I would like to see policy developed. What is it you want in your area? Give us the idea and we'll make it happen. Now I'd also, as you know, because it's been quite controversial this one, I'm not sure why, I'd support open selections for candidates. Because I think we need to empower our members. We've got to value our brilliant MPs, but we've got to make sure that where there's raw talent within our party, we're encouraging it to come through the party. We could be sitting on the next AOC here in Bristol, and we need to make sure that they've got the chance to rise up through the party if they want to, and be encouraged to do that. And if it's good enough for the likes of the SNP, if it's good enough for the Democrats in America, then it's good enough for us to trust our members to make those decisions. And now they're just the basics, and I believe that they're essential to getting us back into a position where we can win across the country, and that's got to be our focus now. We're going to have a real battle over the next 5 years, and life is going to be difficult for our communities. We're under no illusions about that. And we need to start campaigning and holding the Tories to account and rebuilding trust within our communities. And today I've said that anybody standing for the leadership should back public ownership of key services, and they should back our plan for a green industrial revolution. Well, they also have to have a clear plan to win back where we lost. And the truth is that whoever our leader is, they won't get an easy ride from the media if they're promising to redistribute wealth and power away from those leaders. And I believe we can connect with voters without losing our values, no matter what anybody might say to you, by being clear about how our socialist vision is an aspirational one for the future. I do believe that we can appeal to people's desire for political change by promising meaningful devolution and to end the Gentlemen's Club in Westminster. And I believe we can mobilise hundreds of thousands of members by promising to empower them at every single level of our party, not just expect them to come out knocking on doors when there's an election. Now, I want to conclude by saying this. I know we were all devastated by the defeat in December, and we're all still hurting. But I wouldn't be standing here tonight to be the next female leader of our Labour Party and the next Prime Minister if I didn't believe that we would get back into a position where we will win. Nothing was ever given to us for free, and we're part of a movement that was born from struggles in our workplaces, struggles in our communities, and struggles on the streets, and we'll never give up fighting for that future, because we stand on the shoulders of giants. Those people who were brave enough to fight for what we believed in for all those years. Some of them lost their jobs, some were blacklisted, some did well, some didn't. But they stood up for what they believed in. And they sold our message to our communities to prove that we are the party of the people and that we are the party of aspiration. Now I know we can do that again. And we've got to be brave, we've got to be bold, and we've got to be ruthless. But we'll do that here in Bristol, we'll do that in Salford, we'll do it in Scotland, we'll do it in Wales, and we'll do it in every single constituency right across the UK. We're going to be the party of working people, the party of freedom, the party of justice, and the party of aspiration. And we will rebuild our movement and stay true to our values, and don't ever, ever shy away from that. Because that's our path to power, and that's how we can win. So thanks for listening to me, everybody. That was a longer speech than I expected. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, I can shout. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? So we have time for a few questions. I'll take 4 all at once. So if you could please raise your hands high, that would be great. Okay, start. Go.
Hi, my name's Scott Wainwright. Currently a member of...
I can't hear.
Hi, sorry. My name's Scott. I'm currently a member of the Newport West Labour Party and probably know Ruth quite well. My idea to you is, my question to you would be, currently Finland have an amazing way in how they're tackling with homelessness. Do you see, if you were made Labour leader, do you see yourself going down the same route that Finland currently are to tackle with homelessness?
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, in the red hoodie. There.
Hello. I was very active in Labour for a Green New Deal, and I'm now working for Green New Deal UK, which is a charity which are not officially affiliated with any political party. But my role is I'm trying to create an army of regional organisers around the UK to fight and push for a Green New Deal throughout the UK. My question to you is, how do we go about trying to do this when the Labour Party are not in government and when we have a Tory government? So I just don't think it's possible within a free market economy. I don't think it can be done within capitalism the way that it's currently structured. But for example, we can't wait until the next Labour government comes into power to start doing something about it. So Bristol City Council is looking for £1 billion in private investment to create the City Leap, which would be a real big investment in renewable energy and technology. So do we tell them to hold back because it shouldn't be done through private enterprise, or do we try and push for it despite the fact that it's going to be done through a market economy?
Thank you.
Hello, I thought that was fantastic and I will be voting for you. High-profile figures in the mainstream media tell us that the Labour Party is riddled with anti-Semitism. You signed up to the Board of Deputies pledges. Do you believe that the Labour Party has a significant problem with anti-Semitism, significantly more than 0.08% of the membership? If not, why did you feel the need to sign these pledges, and do you think that by signing them and adhering to them, that this will be the end of the issue, or, as many fear, just the start? Thank you.
Sorry, slightly related to a previous question, I was wondering if you had any specific plans for Labour's role in community activism and establishing parallel support structures in the next few years? Because, well, it does look like the next few years are going to be pretty rough. A lot of people are going to end up in fairly serious trouble, and we've got a Robert Barrett government who isn't going to help them. So, as you mentioned, Labour was founded out of street level activism, street level support. We don't derive our power and our support from institutions, but from directly helping people. So, how do we want to directly help people before the next election, whenever that comes?
Okay, right, so I'll come back on all of those together then. So, Scott, on the Finland model. I'm not an expert on Finland's model, I have to be honest, but what I would say is this, is that any civilised society should not have homelessness in it. Now, we know what needs to happen. We know that we have a housing crisis that the current government refuses to deal with, and we know that tackling that housing crisis doesn't just lie in allowing the construction of private dwellings. We need a mass council house building programme. We also need to ban right to buy unless they're being replaced on a like-for-like basis. And when it comes to the private rented sector, we've also got to make sure that those tenancies that are provided are secure tenancies at a fair rent. So there needs to be regulation because it benefits communities. Because most communities want people living there for a long period of time to put down roots, to stay there, and they're only going to do that if they feel secure and they have that secure tenancy. In areas where people are constantly transient and having to move around, it has a negative impact because people don't put roots down in the community, they don't become part of the fabric, and that's bad for them and it's bad for the community. But we've also got to put far more resource into many of the support services that are available to homeless people, because being homeless can happen for a multitude of reasons. It could be because of mental health issues, it could be because of drug and alcohol issues, it could be genuinely because you've been kicked out and you don't have any money and you can't afford to, or that might have happened at the start and then you eventually ended up using drugs to try and deal with the situation. So it's very, very complex. And I remember when I went to, because we do kind of like an annual count in Salford to see how many homeless people are kind of out and about. And I remember going to one of the places in Salford where they have a dormitory essentially for homeless people, and they had a separate building that was like a little bungalow, and I was talking to the guy that was running it and I said, well, what ideally would you like to see, because clearly you need more capacity? And he said, we need more homes, but we've got to remember that if you've been living on the streets for 6 months, a year, even longer, you're fighting to survive, and you're not going to go like that straight back into normal life and be able to cope with things. You need help, exactly. So it needs to be a transitional process. So that's why you had the little bungalow. You said, well, what we do is when we've got the people in the dormitories, they're there for a bit, and the ones that we think are ready to kind of transition, then we'll have them living in the bungalow for a bit, and then we'll help them and start helping them on the path to becoming part of a functioning society, if you like. So it's complex, but it needs to be done, and it's one of the most important things that a Labour government needs to do. I didn't get the name of the gentleman from Green Deal UK, so I'll call you Green New Deal UK man. Green New Deal, I can't even say it now. Green New Deal UK man. How do we get the Green New Deal without a Labour government, and do we hold back on private enterprise if our local authorities or local areas are doing it? I think you kind of touched in the right area. Now, we're not going to be in power, so we're not going to have the power to take the energy networks into public ownership and pump lots of money into investing in offshore and onshore wind and all of the things that I would have liked to have done. However, we've got to remember that we have a multitude of Labour-run authorities that are starting to do things on the Green New Deal, and we want to encourage them to do the right things, and we want to celebrate what they are doing. So, for example, many local authorities are looking at solar panels, and sometimes that's done in a public-private partnership where the local authority might own half of it and the private sector might own the other half. So the local authority has control to an extent, and it's a similar idea to the one that we put forward in the manifesto on wind farms, where we would take a 51% stake, we'd let the private sector take a 49% stake, but it gave the public sector the power to determine who the supply chain was, to make sure it was local, that we were using British steel, that all the workers were treated well. It also gave us power to then determine what happened with profits, making sure that they were reinvested into the community and things like that. So there are clever things that our Labour-run authorities can do and that we can promote and encourage them to do, and that's what we certainly need to do as quickly as possible. It's also a case of encouraging new forms of business ownership, as I said before, energy cooperatives and things like that. Now they're on their own going to transform the entire landscape when it comes to a green industrial revolution, but it's a start and it's certainly something to be encouraged. On anti-Semitism, do I think that, you know, all of our members are anti-Semitic? No, of course I don't. And I think it's been like, it's one of the worst things that many of our Labour members have had to deal with, and certainly from mine in Salford when we were knocking on doors in the general election, from a group of people who fought against anti-Semitism and racism all our lives, to hear on the doorstep from many voters within our Jewish community that they don't trust us, was absolutely heartbreaking. Now the problem, and you know that I've seen kind of the problem from the inside, the problem that we had within the party was that historically we became a huge party, and that's something to be celebrated, but then we didn't have structures in place to be able to deal with complaints that came in quickly enough. We also saw a complete change in the way that people were communicating with each other on Twitter and social media. That didn't happen years ago, it happens all the time now, and that's where the vast majority of complaints come from, social media and Twitter. And we needed to make sure that those processes were fit and robust and, you know, leading the way in terms of where political parties are. And unfortunately, for a period they weren't. Great things happened, you know, progress was made, but despite that progress, we're still not far enough along the road in having that process that really works, that we can provide trust in. And that's why I signed up to those pledges, because I think that we do need an independent process. I think we need to be careful in determining what an independent process is, and I don't think it's just for anti-Semitism, it's got to be for all forms of discrimination, because there's not a hierarchy of discrimination. No one form of discrimination is more important than the other, they're all important. But I want a process that everyone has trust in, and then we can ask other political parties to adopt as well, so that we do lead the world when it comes to tackling these things. But on the final point on that, because one of the things that members say to me when we talk about this is that they're worried about signing up to the pledges being an indication that we're going to limit people's ability to talk about the political situation between Israel and Palestine, and that should never happen. The Labour Party has always been a party campaigning for human rights and campaigning for peace across the world, and that's what we should always do, and we should stand up when we see that there are things happening that we don't agree with, that we think are abuses of human rights, etc., etc. And I'll be making that point very clear as leader of the party, but that's not to say that we don't have an educational programme within our party, which I think that we do, to make sure that the language that we're using when we're having these discussions is right, and nobody's accidentally or deliberately saying things that might be construed in a way that might offend someone or make them feel uncomfortable. But I think every single member in the room would accept that. On community activism is going to be key. And one of the things that we always struggle with as Labour members, because we're socialists, so we're not used to being individualistic and going, well, look at me. Well, a few people are, we probably know who they are. You know, we're not, but we're not wired like that. So when we do good things within our community, we just do it because we want to help people, because we're nice and we love our neighbours and all of that sort of stuff. We don't want to walk around with a rosette going, it's me, helping at the food bank, Labour. But we're going to have to start making sure that people know that the Labour Party is the community, and we're going to have to start organising so that people view us as the fourth emergency service, if you like. And because the situation is so dire now, you know, citizens' advice is cut, local authority budgets are cut, people can't get advice when it's whether it's housing, whether it's immigration. People are destitute in many cases, but they're too embarrassed to say anything and they need that support. And we need to be there to catch them when they fall. And there's a limited amount of what we can do, but sometimes just knowing that you've got people there that want to support you and want to stick up for you and want to be your voice gives people hope. So that's what we've got to do. And action teams is another thing. I was talking to somebody the other day on a Zoom call about this is another exciting thing that we need to do in the party, Zoom calls for meetings. But I did a Zoom call and they made the suggestion of action teams, and I thought, you know, you need to do community action teams, whether you're going out doing a litter pick or you're going out to kind of all help at a food bank or go to help at citizens' advice, so that you're visibly seen as a Labour Party, like once a week, like your branch goes out and does that. So it's not campaigning, you're not knocking on doors and asking people if they're going to vote Labour, you're actually doing things for the community, and that's what we need to do.
Okay, perfect. Rebecca, I really wanted to thank you so much for coming and answering our questions and being here today. And it's been such an inspirational event, so thank you so much. Yeah, please.
See, that's what I mean when I say as socialists we're all a bit kind of like, because when anybody does that, I'm a bit like, can you tell me what I thought? What thanks is really kind.
That's what I love, right? So if you've enjoyed what you've heard today, if you're on board for Rebecca, we have one request for you. If you could pull out your phones, I have a phone number for you to text. I'll give you a second. Grab your phones. And when you're ready, just shout. Okay, everyone ready? No. Okay, you'll be texting, I want to help. And this is in order to help phone bank other members for to vote for Rebecca. So, ready? It's 074 941 56562. One more time? Yeah, okay. So it's 074 941 56562. And unfortunately, this isn't Rebecca Long Bailey's phone number, but it is a volunteer's phone number, so please don't text them at 1 in the morning. But yeah, that's all we have today. Thank you all so much for coming, and go Rebecca Long Bailey!
Yeah.